backwards. So today, focus on the family, Semper Fidelis. Now, this is a military term. It is borrowed from the United States Marine Corps. More than 200 years ago, when that corps was being formed, they went through several motto series because they knew that shall be their clarion call. The thing that they call upon their men who are willing to lay down their lives for the nation to rally around. And so a lot of thought was given to it. And we had 3 variations, and this is the 4th one that was arrived at. Semper Fidelis. This is the motto of the United States Marine Corps. So what is a motto? 3rd slide, media team. A motto is a short sentence or phrase chosen as encapsulating the beliefs or ideals of an individual. So it starts with you. A family, what we have just prayed for, or an institution, what we've just done as a corporate body. And Semper Fidelis means always faithful. Now think about the mottos that we've all had growing up, in primary school or in secondary school. I must confess I cannot remember my primary school motto. However, I do remember the one for secondary. So let's go through a few. Some of you in this room, when I say strong to serve, you'll start talking about Alliance Boys, because that was the motto of Alliance. If I say Natulenge Juu, and then now Starehians start talking, or as I was recently educated, that when Starehe boys meet, they introduce each other by their index numbers. And given that one of my siblings went to Starehe, I think he told me his is 11999. So whenever a Starehean meets another one from Starehe, they say 11999, then the other one maybe says 10111, and therefore they're able to know, gauge which years they joined or graduated from the institution. I even saw Precious Blood rerouter, forwards ever, backwards never. The institution that my sister went to, Leroto High School Limuru, united in love and peace. Now, these are the things that formed our identity as institutions in the high schools we belonged to. What about our nation? Kenya has a motto, and ours is Harambe. Now, depending on your age group, there's some of you who knew Harambe from Mzee Jomo Kenyatta. Me, I knew it, Harambe, we used to say, Nyayo. That was always the clarion call, that was the response. I don't quite remembering Mzee Mwai Kibaki or Uhuru Kenyatta using it. I'm yet to hear our current president use it. And Harambe was simply, let us all pull together. You know, when I think about it, some things when we translate from Swahili to English, I don't understand. So when you take our national anthem, E Mungu nguvu yetu, that's the first line in Swahili. But in English, O God of all creation, always leaves me with question marks. Because E Mungu nguvu yetu, O God our strength. How was that translated to O God of all creation? You know, so how is Harambe, let us all pull together? However, that is what the framers of our country thought about it. What about cars? Cars have slogans. If you drive a BMW, it is literally sheer driving pleasure. I remember once when my wife and I were coming from Nanyuki and we were in a BMW. My God, you know, I thought I was driving at 80 kilometers. Then I looked down at the speedometer. We were at 140 kilometers an hour. That car was truly sheer driving pleasure. Then there are the cars we all aspire to, like a Porsche. There is no substitute. And if you've been driven in a Porsche, you know for sure that car has no substitute. What about those of you who like Mercedes-Benz? The best or nothing. And the way that car is engineered, for sure, they actually live up to that phrase, the best or nothing. What about institutions? Safaricom. In my mind, it is still the better option. because that is what they told us. They are the better option. I think they've rebranded to Twaweza. That doesn't quite have the same ring for me. But it was the better option. When you think of government institutions, iTax, simple, swift, secure. And for sure, if you lived in the days of the ITMS system where you had to queue at Times Tower before you get service, as opposed to now, despite technological challenges, you can just do it from the comfort of your home. It is truly simple, swift, secure. So, what about families? I'd like to encourage us to adopt this motto, Semper Fidelis, always faithful. Now, these are two very powerful words, always faithful. But it's the first word that is critical. Because the Marine wasn't just to be faithful at his convenience. He was to be faithful at all times. It is the conduct of his how he was to display this fidelity. Always. And being always faithful is very, very, very difficult. It is impossible to always be faithful in your own strength. That is why God tells you, lean on me. Rely on me. Because where you are weak, I am strong. When you are weary, I shall carry you through. I think it's in Isaiah, he says, you shall mount up on wings like eagles. That though you grow weary, you shall not faint. These are the things that God tells you is necessary and critical for you to always be faithful. So let me ask you, gentlemen in the house, are you always faithful? As a father, as a husband. If you're in a relationship, are you always faithful to your significant other? Ladies in the house, same question. Are you always faithful to your children, to your husband? And if in a relationship, are you faithful to your significant other? And if you're single, are you faithful to the tenets of God? Are you living life as God describes it? Or are you living life as you describe it? Our anchor verse today comes from Psalms chapter 33 verse 4 in the Passion Translation. For God's word is something to sing about. He is true to his promises. His word can be trusted. And everything he does is reliable and right. In other words, God is always faithful in his thoughts towards you, in his words towards you, in his deeds towards you. And because he is, therefore you are. And therefore you can draw strength from him for you to be always faithful. So God shows you how to do it. That's why you're created in his image. So that you can show it to others. So look at this image with me. I think it's the fourth or fifth slide, media team. So just look at this image with me. These are two men walking, hands crossed at their backs. And they must be discussing very deep things. Business, politics, state of the economy, their wives maybe, Yeah? Whatever it is they're discussing, it has them so engrossed. And he probably had come, maybe it was bring your son to work day. So one of those gentlemen has come with their sons. So he's not even paying attention to what is happening behind him. But look at that little boy. And it's highly likely that his father is the one in a lighter jacket, because that's where he's walking. But he too has his head bowed down and his hands crossed behind him, because he's doing what daddy does. Because children don't learn by what you tell them. And even you think about your own life right now as an adult. You didn't learn by what you were told. You learned from what you saw being done. So if you have young children, if you preach water but drink wine, let me guarantee you your children will have a healthy relationship with that same wine. Because children don't do what you tell them. They do what you do. You are the poster of what it means to be an adult to your child. Those words accompanying that photo are lyrics from the song, "Oh, Be Careful, Little Eyes." So allow me to read for you so that you can understand what your children are looking at. "Oh, be careful, little eyes, what you see. Oh, be careful, little eyes, what you see. For the Father up above is looking down in love. So be careful, little eyes, what you see." Parents, the content of the things you watch, would you watch them with your grandmother? Do you watch things that the moment your children walk into the room, you have to switch it off? And why? Because much as you think that your children haven't caught it, oh, they've caught it. And they're going to do the exact same thing. Do you have statements in your house like, "This is only for mommy and daddy," in terms of what we watch? Do you have statements like, "You cannot see these things on my phone"? Is there a need to password protect your images? Can your children access your gadgets and your devices at all times? And of course, all of this in moderation. Because maybe if you work in security, you have classified information. By all means. But the things you watch in your leisure time, is it only for mommy and daddy? And therefore, there are some things your children can only watch when they are supposedly older. So now we've begun segmenting what they can access. Is it wholesome, family fun to watch? And if you feel your children are too young, then let's go to our grandmothers. Is this something you'd watch with your grandmother? Or be careful, little children, what you see. Or be careful, little ears, what you hear. Or be careful, little ears, what you hear. For the Father up above is looking down in love. So be careful, little ears, what you hear. Is your mouth saved, or do we need to wash it with bleach? What words march out of your mouth? Do you curse? What are the things you talk about? Are you always tearing people down? Are you a gossiper? What do you say to your children? What kind of music do you listen to? Is it the kind of music that if you had your child repeating the same lyrics, or if you had another child repeating those lyrics, you're like, "Oh my gosh, whose child is that?" Okay. The kind of music you consume, is it something you'd recommend for your child to listen? Because they're listening. And when they grow up, they will do that version of music for their generation. What are you exposing your children to? Some of us have issues with some of the music we listen to because of what we listened to growing up. Maybe there was no moderation. So my ears have had all manner of things. But are you doing that to your children? And then, oh, be careful, little hands, what you do. For the Father up above is looking down in love. So be careful, little hands, what you do. What do your children see you doing with your hands? I was in a forum the other day, and I mean, it's an adult forum, and it's a graduation ceremony. And, you know, as all graduations go, you invite your close loved ones. So someone in the group had come with his spouse. And I was like, wow, fantastic. But in that same group, there were other people who were very familiar with them. I assume it's their colleagues. And maybe this is just me. But at some point, this gentleman who had come with his wife went to another lady, and suddenly they were touching each other's faces. And not in the way, hi, no. Like, listen to me. He was like, bruh, you're a good wife. That she can see that and she's dope. Wait. But I wouldn't want that for my daughter. I can't show her that those are the type of things you do in front of your spouse. How appropriate is your physical demeanor around other people? What do your children know about personal space? What are you demonstrating to them in terms of how far is too far? Because what you do physically is what you'll see your kids do. How you dress, how you cover up yourself with your hands is exactly what you'll see in your sons, is exactly what you'll see in your daughters. When they take their hands to work, what shall they see? And then, oh, be careful, little feet, where you go. For the Father up above is looking down in love. So be careful, little feet, where you go. So do your legs constantly walk to a bar? Do they constantly walk to the club? Do they constantly walk to places where it's a social gathering and rarely at home? And there's nothing wrong going out once in a while to have a drink. I'm not here to preach against it. But where do your children see you frequenting often? Because that is what your children will take to be normal. And when they grow up and they want to be just like mom or just like dad, it is in those exact same places their feet shall go. So in the places you visit and in the places you go, do you want to see little feet behind you? Like I said, you are the template for your children. And then, oh, be careful, little heart, who you trust. For the Father up above is looking down in love. What are the things that mean the most to you? What do you value? And what do your children see you valuing? Is it prestige, title, and honor? Is it God, relationships, and service? And there's nothing wrong with prestige, title, and honor. But is that where your heart is secure? Is that the pursuit of your life? Or do they see you serving others? Where is the position of your heart? Because when your children see you chasing clout, they shall chase clout. When they see you willing to serve, then they become service members of society as well. And lastly, oh, be careful, little mind, what you think. For the Father up above is looking down in love. All these things end up forming your life philosophy. Because it's in what you do, how you talk, how you act, that will shape their minds. What do you give them access to? And what do they see you having access to? That is exactly what your kids will do. And so if you don't like the mindset of your children, or if you don't like your own mindset based on where you have come from, it's up to you to change it. Because what your children see you doing and the mindsets you adopt, for example, poverty mindset versus abundance mindset, it's from somewhere. Some of you have no problem conceptualizing 1 billion. Some of you, even 1,000 shillings a day is a problem. Yet you earn 1 million shillings, probably. But how you spend that money speaks a lot to your mindset. How you value people speaks a lot to how you saw your father and your mother treating one another. Some of us don't know how to treat women. Why? We never saw women around us. Some of us don't know how to handle a man. Why? There were no men when we were growing up. And so here is a child who has grown up to be an adult, and maybe in one way or another is dysfunctional. And we are condemning this adult. But those little feet were following what they saw. And therefore those little feet, when they become big feet, shall have other little feet behind them. And then therefore the generation and the cycle continues. So children are constantly looking for the approval and the validation of their parents. That is why they are little feet behind you. So what are you going to do? Because children interpret love and they interpret life based on what they see. If they see you, dad, being abusive to mom, and you have a daughter, when that daughter grows up, if she's not abused by a man, she shall think this man does not love them. The other day I heard on a radio station, now I was being told of it, that a woman called in and said that mi bwanangu asiponichapa mi sijui kama ananipenda. And people are laughing about it. And that disturbed me to my core. This is probably a lady that grew up seeing her mom being physically abused by the dad. And that is what she interpreted to mean love. There is a boy who does not know how to speak respectfully to a woman, but probably it's what he saw at home. There is a girl who may not know how to submit to her husband, but it's because she never saw the mother submitting to the husband. Maybe the wife was constantly contentious with the man, always contending for authority. So when she had a home of her own, she doesn't know how to respect the guy because she saw it from mommy. And unless she takes God in her life and looks for godly women to counsel her, and even the boys, unless you look for godly men to counsel you, how then will you be functional? So how can we be always faithful as parents? The first thing we must do is to stem the tide. Media team, the relevant slide. We must stem the tide. And I want you to look at the image here, because this is an issue of stopping generational curses or generational dysfunctions. That the great-grandfather called their child, "You are stupid." Therefore, the grandfather said to his son, "You are not good enough." But the father had the wisdom to stem the tide and hold up the shield. He had to be the midwife. He may not have known what to say to the son, but he probably tried his best to say the right thing to that child. And then therefore it allowed his son to tell his grandson, "I'm proud of you. I love you." That man, that third man, stemmed the tide. He was faithful to his family. Stemming the tide is a military term that was coined by Julius Caesar. That is why he said there is a tide in the affairs of man, which taken at the flood leads on to fortune. Because there is an opportunity for you to lead your future generations onto fortune. That is why when we were talking about the Imago Dei and we were describing the ancestor, we were talking about an individual from whom many descendants came. Because of that one man, the man in blue, future generations have a hope. He did not continue with the cycle. So mom and dad, do your words minister healing and hope, or do they destroy and tear down? Because remember, Proverbs 18:21 in the Amplified Version says, death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it and indulge it will eat its fruit and bear the consequences of their words. Mom and dad, you grew up in a context. Individuals, you grew up in a context. But it does not have to be the context of your future generations. You can stem the tide. You can hold the flood. This does not have to be the inheritance of your children or your children's children. Because scripture says that a righteous man leaves an inheritance for his children and his children's children. Look at that man. He left an inheritance for his son and his grandson. That now they were free of toxic cycles, destructive patterns. But one of you has to stem the tide. You have to give an emotional and spiritual heritage that is healthy and that allows your families to go on to fortuitous purpose. You can be the one. But once you've stemmed this tide, what happens next? Then you must ingratiate values into these children. Stemming the tide is not sufficient. You have to move on to the next stage. You need to ingratiate values in your children. And Matthew 11:12 in the Amplified says, from the days of John the Baptist until now, the kingdom of heaven suffers violent assault, and violent men seize it by force as a precious prize. Media team, the next slide, please. Ingratiating values has everything to do with who you value the most. That image speaks very clearly that once you've stemmed the tide, but you do not ingratiate values, because values is a function of attention. Whoever wants the next generation the most will get them. Of the 5 great military generals of Rome, the best is arguably Marcus Aurelius. And this is what he had to say about attention. The value of attentiveness varies in proportion to its object. The value of attentiveness varies in proportion to its object. How much do you value your children? And are they important enough for you to fight for their attention? Because the kingdom of heaven suffers violence, and the violent take it by force. Your children are what heaven is all about. Because God says in Genesis 1, let them multiply and be fruitful, that they may replicate the Imago Dei. This is about your kids. Your parents had the responsibility to raise you in the image of God so that you can raise your children in the image of God, so that then they can raise their children in the image of God, and so on and so on and so forth. What we see as a breakdown of the social fabric is first and foremost a breakdown of the family. We can talk about how World War II was the breaking point for a lot of families. Not so. We can talk about how in Kenya, the emergency was the breakdown of the emergency. The emergency was the breakdown of the family. True, but that's not all that there is to it. All of this goes back to the day Adam and Eve did not obey God. That was a breakdown of the family. And Satan is very clear in his agenda. We may all think about economics and politics and so on and so forth, but the real agenda is family. Because family is where children's values are forged. Corrupt people, what values do they have? Or values ingratiated in them? You who is laissez-faire about whether you want to raise your children or not, especially as a father, what values were ingratiated in you? What captures your attention? And presently, who has the attention of your children? And remember, your children are little feet following you. What are you watching? Are you constantly on TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook? Is that your life, that you're constantly on a phone? And therefore, when your children turn out the same way, why are we shocked? Where do your children go to for authority and information? Is it you, mom and dad? Or is it their peers and Facebook and TikTok and Instagram? Who has the attention of your children? Because that's what this is all about. Attention. And in marketing, for those of you who are marketers, you know the most precious commodity, the currency of your business is attention. Because if you have someone's attention, then you have access to their resources. If you have someone's attention, you can shape their thinking patterns. If you have someone's attention, you can define their life philosophy. What philosophy do you have as a home? What philosophy do your children have? Because all of that stems from their attention, that they are given or not given. So is your career the sole focus of your attention? Or is it your wife? Or your children? And if you're single, what is currently occupying your attention? Is it God? Because this great spouse that you're praying for is on the other side of you honoring God with your attention, with the first fruit of your day. And let me tell you what the result of this is. One day your children will come to you and say, "Mommy, Daddy, why did you teach me this or didn't teach me this?" And if you look at their lives, if they have great lives, that is the fruit of you giving them attention. If their lives are in want, that is again the fruit of your attention. And children want to know one thing and one thing only, that mom and dad, I was worth the fight. Because there are all manner of things calling for their attention. Social media, peers, they have their own things going on, school, teachers. Are they worth the fight for your attention? Because if they know they are worth the fight for your attention, when they have children of their own, then they shall fight for their attention. And that is how you end up with a multi-generation of godliness. They want to know that they are worth the attention. Semper Fidelis, always faithful. And last but not least, mom and dad. The third thing for you to be faithful is to travel light in life. Matthew 11:28-30 in the NASB version says, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is comfortable and my burden is light." Now this lady, Hannah Moore, said, and this is what this traveling light is all about. It's all about forgiveness. Forgiveness is the economy of the heart, because forgiveness saves the expense of anger, the cost of hatred, and the waste of spirits. Forgiveness is the economy of the heart, because it saves the expenses of anger, the cost of hatred, and the waste of spirits. First things first, you grew up in a context. For those of you who grew up in great homes, you're unlikely to have heavy wounds. All of us have wounds, but they're unlikely to be heavy. But if your father and your mother caused you wounds, Are you willing to forgive them? Because if you don't, then it's highly likely that you're not forgiving your wife or your husband. Because you cannot give what you don't have. And therefore, if you're carrying burdens, and then now you're accumulating other burdens in your marriage, you're passing it on to your kids. And none of us want bitter children. None of us want children who don't know how to let go. None of us even like being around people who are bitter or who don't like letting go. But it starts with you. You want your children to learn how to forgive? It starts with you. You want them to travel light in life? It starts with you as an individual person. Do your children constantly see the ministry of forgiveness in your marriage? Because a good marriage is just two people who have just gotten good at forgiving one another. If you've been married for a season, you know that you have had to forgive your spouse for your own sanity, not necessarily theirs. But when you do that, then you leave your children to be free, to grow up unencumbered. There are scenarios now, some of us get divorced. Things just get so bad, we have to leave one another. Or, we had a child, we never got married. Single dad, are you keeping your daughter or your son away from their mother? Single mom, are you keeping your son or your daughter away from their father? What has this innocent young child done to deserve that, while the problems are for you as adults? And now some of you are full-grown adults and you're yet to meet your mom or your dad. Because two adults could not agree. Last week at Main Chapel, a video was played. And I'd just like to turn your attention to the screen. I want you to see the power that meeting your parent has, regardless of whatever we adults go through. Media team, if you could just cue in that video. I just want you to see what happens when these men met their dads.
My name is Kelvin Karanja. I'm born again. I'm a father of twins, and I'm here with my best friend, who was my best man in 2019.
My name is Simon Kemiringendo, and I'm happy to share my story.
So I started an exciting journey in February 2023 when I joined MINISTRIES Season 1, and I tagged along my good friend Simon.
It was really impactful in terms of learning how to open up, and even at home, knowing how to take care of your family, your wife. I think it's such an amazing journey.
For me, what stood out was when we had a topic of a wounded warrior and getting to know your identity as a man. So our leader Jack really challenged us in knowing who you are, where you've come from. So by the time he learned that some of us grew up without fathers, he challenged us to go out there and look for them and hopefully reconnect.
Yeah, so we found that we have something in common. We grew up without fathers, and now we are here. Our facilitators are really pushing us that you need to know where you came from.
I had met my dad only once when I was 10 years, and 25 years later, here I am, and starting the search for my dad again. So I talked to my mom, and luckily she was excited about it.
I never asked about my dad to the family. So because I felt like this dad should have looked for me, possibly because we were a bit young.
So my search for my dad this time was for the right reasons, for the simple reason that I wanted to know my identity and where I came from. So we set off on a journey to Meru. Yeah, we went in and entered the house. Mixed feeling at that moment, but I can tell you, Simon, it was the best feeling ever.
I didn't know exactly where my dad came from, but we started the journey to look for my dad. I remember when we reached Kikuyu, that's where my dad's brother was. When I saw him, and I told him that I'm Simon Kimiringendo, he was moved. We cried, and my dad, the first thing he says is my son. So, like when he just said that word, everyone broke to tears.
Reconnecting with my dad 25 years later, it has brought another perspective of life. I feel blessed. I feel excited. Actually, since we reconnected in Meru, I think I've just been happy the whole time. Yeah, it's like a breath of fresh air. Also, as a father of twins, a boy and a girl, I want to make that difference, to be a father who is present and who is performing all the roles.
Man Enough has really been a blessing to me and to my family. I'm expecting to be a better husband, a better dad, and even a friend or a mentor to many more men. Special thanks and also wishes to one person who has been an amazing dad, Samuel Ndongo. Happy Father's Day, and may God bless you. And to my new dad Mkubwa, happy Father's Day. I'm happy to know you.
Happy Father's Day to all dads who have been present and doing their best that their children will grow up knowing their fathers. And a special shout out to my dad. Happy Father's Day. I love you.
Moms and dads, don't let your sons get to 35 before they know their dad. And even if these guys cantankerous, let them have the choice to do that. Dads, do not let your daughters or your sons get to 35 or 40 before meeting their mothers, regardless of whatever state they're in. Because then you can be there to manage those emotions and travel that journey with them. Now I'm grateful that for these men it turned out great. And I'm very happy for them. But that may not be the story of everybody, but at least give your children that choice. Let them at least have that opportunity to make that decision. Because if they can see you forgiving that particular parent, then it even gives them the strength that when life beats them around, because life will beat them around, then they too can learn to travel light. And mom and dad in the same home, learn to forgive one another and differ in private. Then your children can travel light. For their own good, not for anybody else's, so that they can grow up to be functional adults. And when the time comes, then they can raise grandchildren and great-grandchildren that hopefully shall also be functional adults. Being faithful is not easy. And I'm preaching this to myself the most, to be honest. But I challenge you, just like a Marine, to always be faithful with your children, that you can stem the tide for them, that you take the time to ingratiate values within them, Because ingratiating is a function of grafting. If you've ever grafted a tree, you have to take the tree, graft it in so that it has a chance at life. That cannot be done from a distance. You've got to be close. So how close are you to your children? They literally need to be grafted for those values to go in. If you don't have values, then question yourself, what are your values? Find men, find women with whom you can begin addressing these issues of values in your home, so that you have something to pass on to your children. And most importantly, because life has a way of encumbering and burdening us, travel light. And if you're finding difficulty traveling light, find other people with whom you can share the load for the sake of your children. I cannot end the service without, as usual, asking that if you want to be the type of man, woman, whether single, married, and single in all its varied forms, that wants to have the hope and the chance to stem the tide, ingratiate values, and travel light, that you must look for Pastor Dominic, Pastor Kevin, Pastor Tony, and myself today, so we can introduce you to the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, that you may embrace the Imago Dei within you. So as I close today, allow me to bless you with the words of Moses. Because my prayer is that all of you increase. And as you increase, you may bless others. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord cause his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. And may the Lord lift up his face to you and give you peace. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, just like a Marine, may you always be faithful. Thank you.